It was a night that everyone had been looking forward to, prom night. The air was filled with excitement and anticipation as the students of Crestwood High gathered in the grand ballroom, dressed to impress. The sound of music echoed through the room, and the sparkling lights bounced off the gold and silver decorations, giving the space an almost magical atmosphere. The girls twirled in their elegant gowns, while the boys stood proudly in their tuxedos, some of them even adjusting their ties or straightening their jackets in front of the full-length mirrors. Among them was Maya, a beautiful young black girl, dressed in a stunning orange prom dress that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was styled in soft curls, and she looked every bit the princess of the night. Maya had been dreaming of this moment for months, imagining what it would feel like to be surrounded by her friends, dancing, laughing, and celebrating the end of high school. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of the hard work, the long hours of study, and the countless hours spent in preparation for this big moment. But Maya had no idea that this night would turn into something far different, something she could never have imagined in her wildest dreams. The night had started off just like she had hoped. Maya had danced with her friends, enjoyed the food, and even had a few laughs. The music played on, and she felt the joy of the moment, surrounded by the people she had spent 4 years of her life with. Everything felt perfect until a moment of tension suddenly broke the bubble of happiness. It started with a shove. Maya was chatting with her friends near the dance floor, smiling and laughing, when a boy named Tyler, who was known for his reputation as the school's troublemaker, approached. He had always been a little arrogant, and his attitude was often off-putting. But tonight, there was something different about him. His eyes narrowed as he made his way toward Maya. Without warning, Tyler, in a fit of anger, pushed Maya hard in the back, sending her stumbling forward. The music seemed to stop in that instant, as everyone in the room froze, unsure of what had just happened. Maya's heart skipped a beat as the force of the shove caught her off guard. She nearly lost her balance, but she quickly regained her composure, standing up straight again. The crowd around her went silent. Some people gasped, while others turned away, unsure of how to react. It was as if time itself had paused. Maya stood there, stunned, feeling the sting of the unexpected push. She felt her heart racing, not just from the physical shock, but from the emotional turmoil that followed. In a split second, her entire world had shifted. The people who were supposed to be her friends, her peers, were now watching as a boy who had no reason to pick on her made a cruel public move. Tyler sneered as he stood in front of her, the mocking smirk on his face growing wider. His friends, standing off to the side, laughed. "Prom is not for you," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here. Go back to where you came from." His words cut deeper than any physical blow could have, and Maya could feel her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. For a moment, it felt as if the whole room was against her. The sting of the insult, mixed with the surprise of being shoved, filled her chest. It would have been easy to break down right there, to give in to the humiliation. But something inside Maya refused to let this moment define her. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and refused to let Tyler's words and actions control her. The silence in the room was deafening. It was as if everyone was waiting for Maya to react, to fight back, or to run away in shame. But Maya didn't move. She didn't give Tyler the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. Instead, she stood still, her back straight, her hands by her sides, her eyes locked on him. In that moment, Maya knew that she had a choice. She could either let this bully break her spirit, or she could stand tall and show him that his cruelty would not win. Tyler's sneer faltered as he saw Maya's calm response. The crowd, now fully aware of what had just happened, began to murmur among themselves. Some of them looked ashamed for having not done anything sooner, while others were still unsure of how to handle the situation. The tension in the room was thick, and all eyes were on Maya, waiting to see what she would do next. What happened next would surprise everyone. In the midst of the tension, Maya's heart began to steady. The anger that had bubbled inside her was replaced with a quiet sense of strength. The moment of humiliation had passed, and Maya knew that this night was far from over. She wouldn't let Tyler's words, or his actions, ruin her prom night. As she looked around the room, she could see the faces of her friends, some of them looking back at her with sympathy, others with admiration. But one thing was clear: Maya was no longer the girl who had been shoved and humiliated. She was a girl who had the strength to stand tall, no matter what. And this was only the beginning of what would turn out to be a night that no one would ever forget. The next move was hers, and she was ready to make it. The moment was frozen in time. The music that once filled the ballroom now seemed distant, as if muted by the tension that had gripped the room. Maya stood there, still as a statue, her breath steady despite the chaos swirling around her. She felt the eyes of everyone on her, but for the first time, it didn't faze her. The weight of the situation was heavy, and the world seemed to pause as Tyler's words echoed in her mind. Prom is not for you. The words cut like a knife, but it wasn't the words themselves that bothered Maya. It was the intention behind them. The pure cruelty. The sense of entitlement that Tyler seemed to carry as though his actions were justified. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the warm rush of blood in her ears. Every muscle in her body screamed to react, to respond with the same force Tyler had used. She wanted to shout at him, to make him feel the sting of her words, but there was something inside her, a calm, quiet voice that urged her to stay still. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort, and in that moment she made a decision. It was a decision to not let anger control her, to not give in to the knee-jerk reaction that so many expected. In a world that often tried to break people down with hate and cruelty, Maya realized that her true strength would not come from revenge or raising her voice in anger. It would come from choosing how she responded. Her silence, in this moment, would be louder than any words she could ever speak. As she stood there, looking directly at Tyler, her mind swirled with emotions. She felt hurt, of course. Who wouldn't? But there was also something deeper, something more profound, that bubbled up from within her. The hurt was a passing thing, but her strength was what would define her, not the actions of a bully. She wasn't going to allow this one moment to steal her peace, her dignity, or her joy. The crowd stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. Some had already begun to whisper among themselves, their eyes shifting between Maya and the bully, waiting for her to act. Her friends, who had been standing nearby, were now looking at her with wide eyes, their expressions a mixture of concern and confusion. They wanted her to fight back. They wanted her to scream at Tyler, to show him that he couldn't just get away with this. But Maya didn't want to fight with words. She didn't want to lower herself to his level. She had worked too hard to get here. This moment, this night, was hers. It belonged to her and to the people who loved her, not to someone like Tyler. She refused to let him have power over her. Not tonight. Not ever. Maya's eyes softened as she looked at Tyler. His smirk had faded slightly, as if he hadn't expected this response. He had thought that by pushing her, he would break her, that he would see her crumble, fall apart, and leave in shame. But Maya stood tall, her posture regal, her expression calm but resolute. She knew that in moments like these, silence could be the most powerful weapon. It wasn't just about ignoring him. It was about showing him that she was in control. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch, to see her shaken by his cruelty. Maya was much stronger than he could ever comprehend, and she knew it. For a brief second, Tyler seemed to hesitate. He had expected a different reaction. Maybe he wanted her to cry. Maybe he wanted to see fear in her eyes. But Maya wasn't giving him that. Her silence spoke volumes, louder than any words could. It was a moment that turned the tables. The more Tyler tried to provoke her, the more Maya remained unmoved. As the seconds passed, Maya's mind raced with thoughts of her family, her friends, and everything she had worked for. She thought about all the people who had believed in her, who had supported her in her journey. She thought about her mother's words, the advice she had given her when she was younger. You can't control the way others treat you, but you can always control how you respond. And in this moment, Maya was living those words. She had every right to be angry, to yell, to fight back. But Maya knew that responding with anger would only give Tyler power over her. Instead, she chose to hold her ground, to remain composed, and to let the silence speak for itself. It was a silent declaration of strength. As she stood there, the crowd began to shift, slowly but surely. Whispers spread through the room. Some people started to murmur in her defense. A few students, who had been standing on the sidelines, took a step forward, silently offering their support. Maya didn't look to them for validation, but she noticed the change. The energy in the room had started to shift. Tyler, who had been the center of attention moments before, now seemed to shrink in the spotlight. The more Maya stayed silent, the more his actions seemed to backfire. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Maya was. In that moment, she knew what she had to do next. It wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about proving something to Tyler or the crowd. It was about reclaiming her peace, her dignity, and her strength. And she was ready. She didn't need to say a word. The world would soon see that Maya was stronger than any bully could ever imagine. With one last glance at Tyler, Maya slowly turned her back, her shoulders straight, and walked away. The crowd parted to let her pass, and as she made her way to the other side of the room, she could feel the eyes on her. But this time, they were different. There was respect in their gazes. Maya had made her decision, and she had made it with grace. Tyler had tried to break her, but instead, he had just made her stronger. The ballroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as Maya made her way across the room, the weight of the silence heavy in the air. Tyler's words still lingered in the corners of her mind, but she had already made her choice. Her heart raced, but not from fear. It was from the determination and courage that swelled within her chest. Maya knew that the moment she turned her back on Tyler, she had already won. But there was one thing left to do. One final stand to show the world her strength. As she walked towards the far side of the room, her friends tried to catch her attention. They were worried, concerned that Maya hadn't fought back, that she hadn't lashed out. They wanted to defend her, but Maya knew that responding with anger would only lower her to Tyler's level. She wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. She needed to show everyone, not just Tyler, but herself, that strength didn't always mean confrontation. But as Maya reached the edge of the dance floor, something unexpected happened. A quiet voice behind her called out, "Are you just going to let him get away with that?" Maya paused, her body tensing slightly. But she didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She knew the voice. It was Sarah, one of the most popular girls at school. Sarah had always been kind to her, but Maya had never really thought of them as close friends. The fact that Sarah had spoken up, that she had noticed what had happened and wanted to stand up for Maya, made her heart swell. Maya felt a shift inside her. She wasn't going to be a passive bystander in this situation. She had already shown the world her silent strength. But now, in this moment, she knew that she had the power to make an even bolder statement. It was time to take control of her narrative and turn this painful moment into something empowering. She had remained composed, but now, Maya decided to act. With a deep breath, she turned around to face Sarah, and then slowly, deliberately, she made her way back to the center of the room. The room, still thick with tension, seemed to quiet even more as Maya walked back to the spot where Tyler had pushed her. Her steps were measured, confident, and with each one, she felt a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't about vengeance or getting back at Tyler. It was about reclaiming her space and her voice. Tyler stood near the punch bowl, his back turned to her. He was laughing with his friends, still acting as though nothing had happened. Maya's heart pounded with anticipation, but she knew that what she was about to do would change everything. She was no longer the girl who had been pushed aside. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she reached the center of the room, Maya didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she calmly walked up to Tyler, who still hadn't noticed her approach. He was too busy enjoying the attention from his friends. The crowd had fallen into an awkward silence, but now they were watching Maya, waiting for her next move. It was as if they were collectively holding their breath. With a steady voice that carried across the room, Maya said, "Excuse me, Tyler. I need to speak to you." Her words were firm, yet calm, and they sliced through the tension in the air. Tyler turned around, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw Maya standing there, facing him directly. For the first time that night, there was no smirk on his face, only confusion. "What do you want?" Tyler sneered, trying to mask his discomfort with a cocky tone, but it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. Maya was. "I don't want to fight with you," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "But I want you to know something. I won't let your actions define me. You thought I would walk away in shame. You thought I'd crumble. But you were wrong." She paused for a moment, locking eyes with him. "I won't be silenced, and I won't be intimidated. You don't get to decide who I am or where I belong." The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one had expected this. The girl who had been pushed, the girl who had been humiliated, was now standing in front of the boy who had tried to break her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't screaming. She was simply and powerfully speaking her truth. Tyler's face began to change. His confident demeanor faltered, and for the first time, he looked unsure of himself. He opened his mouth to respond, but Maya didn't give him the chance. She continued, "Tonight is about celebrating who we are, who we've become, and I'm not going to let you ruin it. You've shown your true colors, but that's on you, not me. You'll never see me fall. I'll always rise." With those words, Maya turned around and walked away, her head held high. The room, which had been thick with tension, was now filled with a mixture of shock, admiration, and, for the first time that night, respect. People began to clap, quietly at first, and then louder. The applause wasn't for Maya's words alone, but for her bravery, her strength, and her dignity. Tyler, standing there, seemed at a loss. His smug expression had disappeared, replaced by a look of confusion and perhaps regret. He had expected Maya to fall apart, but instead she had turned the tables. She had shown him, and everyone else, what real strength looked like. Maya's heart swelled with pride, not because of the applause, but because she knew that she had stayed true to herself. She had refused to let anyone define her or her worth. She had stood tall, not with anger or violence, but with the quiet power of someone who knew their own strength. The night was far from over, and Maya knew that whatever happened next, she had already won. Maya's footsteps echoed as she made her way back to the other side of the ballroom, her heart still racing from the bold action she had just taken. The sound of applause had already begun to fade, but the warmth of it lingered in the air, wrapping around her like a blanket. The weight of the moment hung heavy, but it wasn't the weight of humiliation or shame. It was the weight of a decision she had made, a decision to stand up for herself, not with force or anger, but with dignity, strength, and grace. The ballroom, which had once been thick with tension and discomfort, was now buzzing with a different kind of energy. There was a sense of awe in the air. Maya could feel the shift in the room as she walked past her classmates, many of whom were looking at her with newfound respect. The whispers that had once been about her embarrassment were now about her courage. The silence that had followed her confrontation with Tyler was replaced with murmurs of admiration. As she reached her group of friends, they surrounded her, their faces a mixture of astonishment and pride. Sarah, who had been the first to speak up, gave her a quick hug. "You were amazing, Maya," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I don't think anyone saw that coming." Maya smiled, but her mind wasn't fully with her friends. She was still processing the events, replaying every moment in her mind. She had expected to feel the sting of humiliation, but instead she felt a sense of clarity, a realization that her choice to stand up for herself had not only shifted the atmosphere, but had also given her a sense of empowerment she had never felt before. The attention from her peers was shifting from the negative spotlight She had been placed in earlier to something entirely different. People who had previously kept their distance were now approaching her, offering smiles and words of encouragement. It was as if they were all silently acknowledging her strength. Even those who hadn't been close friends, those who had perhaps even been bystanders to the bullying, were now offering silent nods of approval. In a corner of the room, a small group of students stood, whispering among themselves. Maya recognized them as the ones who had always stayed in the background, not involved in the drama, but always aware of what was going on. One of them, a quiet girl named Olivia, caught Maya's eye. Olivia gave her a small smile, a gesture of silent support. Maya returned the smile, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was as if Olivia was saying, "We see you. We see what you did, and we respect you." But it wasn't just the quiet nods or smiles that had an impact. It was the change in the air, the way the energy of the room had shifted. Tyler, still standing where Maya had confronted him, looked increasingly uncomfortable. His friends, who had been laughing and encouraging him earlier, now seemed unsure of what to say. Their energy had gone flat, and the attention that had once been on him now seemed to drift away. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was slowly fading, replaced by uncertainty. Maya could see the shift in him. He wasn't the confident bully he had been a few moments ago. He was the one who looked out of place now, and it wasn't just because of the words Maya had spoken. It was because the room had rejected his cruelty. The applause that had followed Maya's confrontation wasn't just for her words. It was for her ability to turn the situation around and take control of her narrative. It was for her refusal to allow herself to be the victim. As the music started playing again, some of Maya's classmates slowly returned to the dance floor, but there was a new sense of awareness in the room. People were more mindful now, more considerate of one another. Maya's actions had created a ripple effect, one that wasn't just about her but about the atmosphere of the entire evening. The crowd's response wasn't just a physical one, it was emotional. They had seen a girl who had been pushed, insulted, and humiliated stand tall and transform the entire situation with grace and strength. And in doing so, she had taught them a valuable lesson about resilience, courage, and self-worth. As the night continued, the conversations about what had happened began to change. No longer was the focus on the bullying or the negative energy that had once surrounded Maya. Now, the conversations revolved around her strength. Her ability to rise above the situation had inspired others. People were talking about the power of standing up for yourself without resorting to violence or aggression. They were talking about the importance of using your voice when necessary, but also the power of silence when it could say more than words ever could. The teachers who had witnessed the confrontation from the sidelines quietly observed the unfolding shift in the room. Some had come over to Maya later in the evening, offering her words of encouragement. "You handled that situation with such maturity," one of the teachers had said. "You should be proud of the way you stood your ground." Maya had simply nodded, humbled by the recognition, but she knew in her heart that the real reward wasn't in the praise or the admiration. It was in the way she had felt in the moment. She had stayed true to herself, and that was enough. As the night came to a close, Maya found herself standing by the door, looking around at the sea of faces that had once been so unfamiliar and uncertain. But now, they didn't seem so distant. She had made an impact tonight, not just on Tyler or the crowd, but on herself. She had shown everyone, especially herself, that no matter what challenges she faced, she had the power to rise above them. And in that moment, Maya understood something important. She didn't need anyone's validation to know her worth. She had already proven it to herself. The crowd had responded not just with applause, but with a deeper understanding of what it meant to stand up against cruelty, to choose kindness and strength over hate, and to never let anyone define your worth. Maya had started the night as just another girl in a beautiful dress, but she ended it as a symbol of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of knowing who you are.